Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for being present in this conference. Thank you very much for following us online. I will remind you the topic of today, the incident response. Well, should it evolve in relation to the cloud? Stéphane Bellec, I'm the chief editor of Cybersecurity Edition. We will tackle this topic with Nicolas Remarque from Gondriam, your head Heritage and Security, Fabrice Delost, your CTO from Mindflow, and Frank Bridek. Hi, Frank. You are the CISO from Chibis that specializes in supporting
digital transformation, right?
Yes, that's correct. We help companies thrive in the cloud.
Voilà, donc on aura un retour.
So, we will have a return on these issues. To put it in a nutshell, cloudification, digitalization are no secret. There's an increasing number of hackings. So the question here is the incident response, which is already defined when you're on site. Well, should it be the same in the cloud strategy? Or should everything be rethought in that framework? I will not answer that question myself. Nicolas, maybe you could answer this issue before answering. When we talk about incident response, what do we talk about? Before being able to answer this question, we should reposition and try and understand the genesis of the cloud to meet today's issues. Cloud, when you think about it, premises of cloud have existed already in the 80s. Most of the time, a website had a host. It was not virtualized, but it was an infrastructure that was out of the company, out of the organization. With digitalization, it accelerated the phenomenon and the cloud became more versatile. One of the main problems of the cloud is its versatility. The cloud today is a driver for technological innovations. Why AI functions that well? It's because of the cloud, because it was possible to set up resources, important resources, and in a versatile way. Particularly, the calculation means the big data, the fact to collect a lot of information. And this led to a new management paradigm, as it was necessary in our industry to delegate. When you have your infrastructure in premises, well, you have to learn how to devolve the responsibility out of the company. So this has existed since a long time in the industry, in the automotive sector, for instance. There is a lot of outsourcing. All the builders have 80% at least of their activity, which is outsourced, which means you have to control quality, the flows, and that's what we're doing with the cloud, the fact that we devolve a part of our activity externally. Why? To be able to focus on the our main activity. Most of us, except if you work for Microsoft, Amazon, or others, well, your activity is not to provide an IT service. And the fact that you devolve part of your activity helps you focus on your main activity, and that's the same for the automotive sector. These people build cars, and that's the same goes for the cloud. So the cloud is a possibility to to delegate part of the management, and until what level, because there is the issue of trust there. And that's an important issue with relation to the cloud, and we will talk a little bit further about this aspect. If you want to understand everything which involves the cloud, I would Cybersecurity Explained to My Grandma podcast is very interesting. It's a podcast in French made by someone who's very intelligent, and I, all the more so since I did it. I did that podcast. If your grandma is interested, she will be delighted, I'm sure. Okay, let's come back more seriously on our topic of the day. There's an issue of adaptation. The cloud is both innovative and old. And there are two categories of organizations. There are the digital natives, i.e. companies that were born with the cloud, startups in France that were, such as Doctolib, for instance, who took the paradigm of the cloud in the design of their project. So there is no issue there, whereas other organizations started with an infrastructures on premises with existing controls, etc., and it might be more tricky there. What is important is to find your balance, not too quick, not too slow. It's not simply lift and shift. Your infrastructure is not only to be shifted to the cloud. That doesn't work like that. You might have difficulties there. Once again, one of the issues or the main aspects of the cloud is you have to manage all these challenges and the difficulties and the monitoring difficulties. Okay, next speaker maybe. I would like to come back on what I was asking, my question on the incident response before seeing how you can transpose it. What is it today when it is on premises? What do you put in it?
Bien, la réponse à incident, déjà, c'est de
incident response means detecting incidents, and the response will be to remedy, to analyze, to make a sense, to prioritize them.
Au niveau, en tout cas, au niveau, on va
It's a very ancient practice in the cloud. The idea is to identify the incidents, and one of the challenges is to detect the false positives. Today there are many false positives. Very often people are talented, but they have a lot of false positives, i.e. false incidents that are spotted, but which are not really incidents. And talents in cybersecurity are not common. So one of the challenges is the response, the remediation. How you're going to isolate, are you going to be able to isolate the problem and stop its proliferation? Can be an intrusion, a malware, whatever. And this remediation involves a lot of different technologies. So you want to remedy an incident, you have to know these tools, and remediation challenges people because we are slower than machines, but to remedy these incidents, we can't stop a business if it's a false positive. You are not going to stop a machine. And strategies will be different if we're during the weekend or during the week. So the incident response is all the same, but also different when you are on the premise or on the cloud. In relation to what Nicolas said earlier on, there was a shift on the cloud of the management of the DSI at the level of infrastructure. So you're going to So you may say, well, in the end, I want to shift my security rules. I will do the same with the cloud as I was doing in my company. But of course, it is different because we hear that transposing your IT on the cloud, it doesn't mean you are going to manage it the same. And the same goes for security and incident response. The service model is different on the cloud. So you have different service models. You probably have heard about YAS, PAS, CAS, FAS, a lot of acronyms. And the nature of these services in the cloud has a different scale as on the premises. Same technologies, but not managed in the same way. And you need to be an expert for each of these. So you have an infrastructure as a service that looks like classical hardware and software. But since 2010, you have seen the containers as a service. You also have serverless that require skills that are very different and that mean different issues in terms of incident management. Incidents will be different. If you're on a virtual machine layer, it won't be the same as high level softwares when you don't know on which machine it is executed. You are a CISO for
transformation digitale, vous les aidez dans leur transformation. What kind of observation you make about this translation from finally I can tell it by his name, the move to cloud for you, for yourself, for your company, and for your clients?
Yeah, so things are the same and they are different at the same time. So I always say, do you have an incident in the cloud or do you have an incident with the cloud? If you have an incident in the cloud, then a lot of your traditional incident management processes apply because you still have machines that can get compromised and evidence that needs to be collected from them. On the other hand, if you have an incident with the cloud, if somebody's actually actively hijacking your cloud account, then it's a completely different game because there's different measures to take. And then with everything cloud, if you don't adopt your mindset, if you don't change your mindset, you're missing out on things because cloud also has a lot of ways that can make your incident a lot faster. It's very hard to make a snapshot of a physical machine, but in the cloud, it's a press of a button and I have captured the state of a device and I can use that later on for investigation. So it's a blessing, it's a curse at the same time. And right now we're in a bit of an uncomfortable spot where the cloud has rapidly accelerated and innovated, but our practices, our knowledge, and our tools have not yet come on par with that transformation. And the good news is tools are on the way that make that easier, that will help address the skill set. But in the meantime, we have to rely on the people, and the people who can really adapt are unfortunately still scarce.
So moving to the cloud, it comes with new problem. Vous êtes d'accord? Enfin, vous faites ce constat aussi,
tout à fait,
Nicolas?
Are you making the same observation? Yes, we have new problems arising. Other times, other habits, because you have different players. Before, you could have an info manager, and now you have different players whose size might be very different. What is the leverage you have with a smaller or bigger provider? Let's talk about responsibility. We're talking about IS. You have more responsibility. If you have a SaaS service, the responsibility is not the same. So the balance between your responsibility and that of your provider might be different, with different integration degrees. If you have a strong relationship with your cloud provider, how can you clearly define these different responsibility levels? We were also talking About architectures, the different architectures and possible dependencies that you're going to create. That's something that is important to take into account when in incident response, because each architecture may have specific problems. In terms of incident response, you do not respond the same way in different cases. So this has to be taken into account. Another element is visibility and control and automation of all these monitorings, and try and be as transversal as possible. It was very well explained as the saying that it is more complex today in the cloud, and so things have to be automated as much as possible. When you try to automate in cybersecurity, it helps you have less false positives. So you have to find the right balance, and this requires a lot of technicalities. I would like to end saying we talked about negative aspects about the cloud, but there is something that is very important when it is mastered. It's resilience, and the resilience is extremely important today because, as you know, European regulation, particularly with DORA, will impose to all the players, major players in finance or other sectors, will impose an increase in resilience, which you can get with the cloud. So it may be difficult to master, but we have to invest. One of the benefits, I think, is resilience, and I think you can also mention honest too. Yes, of course. If you are DORA compliant, you will not NIST 2. If you're NIST 2, you won't be DORA. You one day or another, you will be submitted to one of the two. Thank you very much, Nicolas. On this issue of responsibility that Nicolas just mentioned, you can say that when you are in the cloud and on the other side you have a certain responsibility, at least for some incident responses. How do you share work? This is going to be taken into account by the provider. This I will take care of. Is there, do you work hand in hand? I begin and you finish? How does it work? It is complex because the shared responsibility depends on the service model. IS on a container as service, things will be different. So first thing is that the support level may vary according to the latency you're ready to accept. Responsibility means a shared responsibility. Well, for one incident, sometimes it can be difficult to determine because of the if it's because of the app or because of the provider. Generally speaking, in the cloud, you have the responsibility of your apps and data. If it's app, it's your responsibility, but according to the service levels, you will be discharged of a certain number of things according to the regionalization, observability. And I agree with what was said regarding resilience. In the cloud, we have tools to monitor and observe what happens at the scale, even if it's not perfect, even if you have to appeal to different providers who may also be in the cloud. You may implement things that will help you observe the different service models. This challenges people too, because they need to know all these service models to know what support level they will have. It becomes very technical. You will have to do investigations according to IS or CAS. It's very different, so it's important to train and to adapt. It depends maybe also on the use you're making. There is an elasticity aspect there. As we said earlier on, you can use the cloud to make calculations, but you don't do it on a daily basis. It may be half a day a week. And then the surfer us might be more important and then less important. There are many assets on the cloud that don't last. You have virtual machines that will be mounted and dismounted. So there might be difficulties related to these investigations, because when a machine is closed, it doesn't happen very often on premise. There is a predictability of the assets, whereas in the cloud there is this elasticity. Imagine Black Friday, where an operator will be able to increase its capacity, its infrastructure capacity, but this capacity will not only appear on that specific Black Friday day. So at which speed we'll be able to react in case of an incident, which means that the specific tools in the cloud will come to automate. That's what Frank said earlier on. Frank,
can you share with us, partager your best practice?
Can you share your best practices, please?
So I think the volatility that the previous speaker was talking about really forces us to look at best practices. And if you look at the NIST model for incident response, which is a prepare, detect, then a trio of contain, eradicate, and restore, and then your post-incident phase. I think most of the best practices that are different are in the prepare phase. Cloud forces you to be more prepared. An example of that is, for instance, log management. Just because of that elasticity and that volatility, you need to make sure that you capture logs and actually capture them in a place where the attacker can't reach them anymore and can't alter them. Because if you throw away a cloud service, if you disable a server, a physical server, the disk is still there, the physical device is still there, and there's still something to investigate. But if I go into a cloud console and I click and turn off a managed database server, I have nothing. Maybe there is something in the provider, but then I need to go to the provider. I need to probably get there with a warrant. Well, I can't issue warrants. I'm not a police officer. So it's very hard to get evidence back. So logging becomes more key. I think another one in the prepare phase is that if you move into the cloud, it's an excellent opportunity to work with new best practices, things like infrastructure as a code, tools like CloudFormation, Terraform, which can be really important if you're in an incident response phase, because one of the phases of incident response is restore. If you had a major ransomware attack, it would be great if you were able to click a button and your infrastructure would be rebuilt for you. That's something that's virtually impossible in a physical environment because it would require you to buy twice as much IT equipment. But in the cloud, that capacity is there. That capacity is provided you by the provider. So you could regularly rebuild, and you could even go as far as to say, you know what, I'm having an event every month anyway. When Microsoft comes with their patches, why not rebuild your enterprise, your environment on a monthly basis instead of patching it? You just build up a new environment with a new level of patches. Now, for a lot of companies, that's too far ahead and too advanced, but really regard your cloud transformation, your journey into the cloud, as a moment to really start doing new stuff and adopting new practices. Look at the people who are young, who are cloud natives for this, and not at your old farts like me. Pardon the phrase there, but look at the new generation who know how to natively work with this, who don't regard this as your data on somebody else's computer, but really a different paradigm, because it is.
Thank you. Vous êtes, je vous pose la question en français.
I'll ask you the question because
même en anglais dans l'oreille, donc ça vous le fait deux fois, mon pauvre Frank. Vous êtes RSSI.
You are CISO, and the question you might ask yourself. There are technological aspects, but also organizational and human aspects. How can you dialogue at your place, but dialogue with the DSI? How do you share responsibilities with the cloud provider? But within the company, your CISO DSI relationship, because the cloud is not always in the hand of the CISO. and they have to compose with people they do not have chosen, and a security perimeter that is not the one they have chosen. So in that spirit of best practices, how can you limit the problems?
Yeah, I think the cloud has put us in a situation that is unique. I'm an old man. I remember that Microsoft was the most secure operating system in the world as long as you didn't connect it to a network, and you had guides, hardening guides there, and if you followed the hardening guide of Microsoft, you ended up with a very secure computer that you couldn't use. These days, cloud providers really want you to move into the cloud. So they want you to have a cloud that works, but they also are very afraid of stories that come out there that says, we moved to the cloud and now all our customer data is on the street, or we lost $1 million. So finally, the companies that we work with have the same goals. The same goals for me as a CISO to being secure. The goals is for my business of being agile. The goal of my DSI who wants to have a working infrastructure. So when I got asked that my question, Frank, can you write down the best practices for cloud? I actually looked at the best practices that Amazon and Microsoft published, and my answer was, I'm not going to do it. These are really good practices. So the best practices that are provided by the vendors are actually at this moment very good. There's also very good cloud security posture management tools out there that help you prevent incidents. And if we use that combination, and if you adopt a cloud native way of working, I think you're going to be in a very good position going forward. But yeah, still work to be done, and I think for everybody who's in IT security, job security is a given.
Ok, merci Frank. Peut-être Fabrice et Nicolas sur ce point.
Fabrice and Nicolas, interaction CISO DSI. There again, do you think there is in the dialogue with the DSI? Yes, the relationship between CISO DSI, they both reflect on the information system. So it's important. I would like to come back on the provider aspect. It is true that the cloud providers today set up a lot of good practices, and it's good. But in case there is a problem, the impact is higher than when an on-premises infrastructure. There might be bad configurations that may lead to certain problems. So you have to keep an eye, a benevolent eye on the provider, but potentially there might be security issues, and that's something that the CISO has to bear in mind to prevent such problems. That's an important problem to stress. I would like now to leave you the floor. Yes, I confirm that the cloud is more exposed because it is natively exposed on the internet. The public clouds have leakages. Development teams expose assets directly on the internet that will be exploited, potentially. It's very different with the on-premises. But on the part of the organization, what I observed, I'm not that young. I have seen a lot of things in my professional life. You see a shift between the legacy and the cloud teams. So this disruption may hamper the organization and the relationship between the teams. So you have to pay attention to the training of the teams so that they be balanced. What happens concretely is that with the arrival of the cloud, there was a lot of specialization. So new people are dealing with security. So it's a challenge today, particularly for big accounts, to manage their transformation so that everybody is embedded. People who intervened in the traditional infrastructures. Well, this involves training, and there's no secret. The cloud involves technologies that you cannot do on everything. So people have to be trained to be able to communicate. You cannot discuss cloud infrastructure when you discuss on-premises. And it doesn't need to be very technical, but you need to be embark all the teams, and not only people who are involved in cloud incidents.
And when you talk about training, are there any tools that are specific to the cloud to protect it, to make it safe, secure? Can you add something down to there? Well, the tools are those provided directly by the provider. I mean, detection of incidents, these alert centers that are provided by the producer. So this training is very important because it can provide a cloud certification, and the cloud certification for the team is very important. And a certification, however, remains a piece of paper. The practical aspects are by far more difficult than a piece of paper or to get a piece of paper. So we have to go to the logs that are centralized, and the investigation work requires technical competence that should be advanced, as it is normal for any other sector. So we cannot just consider ourselves satisfied by the fact that we have a certification, and this is not enough. You know, having a certification is just a piece of paper. So we have to join that to the practice. And things are evolving, so you have to continuously train yourself and keep yourself posted with the new evolutions. When you move in the cloud, there is a whole set of tools that are made available to customers, but many of them do not use these tools. You know, there are many dashboards that are very, very useful and that can be made available. So tools are there, but not everyone uses them, and therefore this is very difficult to manage, because as human beings we do not want to have someone saying, well, this is we can see an incident and you have to use the tools. The general trend is to go towards automation, and the tools that could be SSPM, I mean tools that could allow me to automatize in a quicker way and in a more human way, with some human controls and human approvals. Automation doesn't mean that the human person does not intervene. We can have automation and we can control it. And then we have the artificial intelligence that could assist and could help in solving the incidents, in detecting the incidents, and in reducing the famous latencies. And, we're talking about the same thing here. Now the response of an incident in the cloud in these years and in the future will focus on artificial intelligence. This is quite clear. Well, thank you, Fabrice, Franck, and Nicolas. Perhaps on this point, there is correctly the issue of this transformation of the information system towards the outer world. So can we imagine using also the artificial intelligence, but we should also have a sort of a mapping, a real-time mapping. Therefore, you can map all the information system, and you can have a type of system that could be up to making the evolution of everything else. Yes, of course, the problem is that before having a map, the control is necessary. Without the control, you cannot have a mapping. And what we have said many times is that the cloud is a versatile thing. And you are professionals of cybersecurity, and this is not going to be a huge change, for you. But the advantage with the cloud is that you have possibilities of repositories for informations that are more precise because they are, improved automatically, and this can also improve things. The providers also can help you down to there. But when you have an attack, you can have a positive, a fake positive. So you must have a cartography that will help you to manage something that otherwise will be more difficult to manage. And this is something that, we have to improve. We have to improve this experience. And so I go back to what I said up to now, before, from a human point of view, it is almost impossible to manage a cloud, a huge cloud. The scope is important, and therefore you need artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is where you can be helped to detect the perception of an accident. And maybe Frank can complete what I just said. Well, the time up of this question is the assets, that you put at stake.
So I refer to it as the CMDB in the more Anglo-Saxon world, the configuration management database. And yes, it's more challenging because things change more rapidly. On the other hand, the cloud is in itself also an automated CMDB. So for the first time, I'm able to actually, if I go into the data center, it's very hard to go by every row and figure out what is running and which servers are on and which servers are off. But the cloud actually has, one of the key differences between the cloud and a VM is that the cloud has an API where you can extract this kind of information. So it has, at the same time, it has opportunities and it has disadvantages. And I think that real-time map, that real-time view on your assets and what's going on, is actually a huge benefit that comes with cloud. But we do have to organize our work also a little bit differently, and it's less on the map and more on the processes because of knowledge. I think it poses a challenge to security teams because most security teams aren't daily users of the cloud. So you talked about certifications and a bit of paper, and a bit of paper says you know it now, and doing it guarantees that you know it tomorrow and you'll know it better in 3 weeks. And I think right now security teams are usually not in the cloud teams, they're usually not in the DevOps teams, so they don't have their hands on. So we have to come up with a new paradigm where security is also embedded in those teams so that you can actually jointly, the security specialist and the cloud specialist, work together during an incident response, because neither of us can do it alone.
Thank you, Frank. Fabrice, tout à l'heure, vous évoquiez quelques outils, enfin le mot.
Thank you very much. You have pronounced the word tool. And, if I say SOAR, XOR, in other words that I will not mention here, well, me personally, I don't know you, but me, when I walked through the salon downstairs, I was totally lost in the acronyms that I found. So where are we in a concrete way in this way of responding to incidents? Which is the good way ahead? Antivirus or what? Well, you have to have data. You have to exploit the data because the solutions are necessary and are transformed by the cloud part. We have some alerts, so the cloud providers do come with a solution. And then automation today has evolved. I just want to say something because the national management teams, I think that they are going to transform their work. Now they open some tickets and they try to solve the issue, but their work is to be transformed in working towards something automatized. And they will have the tools, they must have the tools to manage these tickets that are open, in the SOA, the specialization of cybersecurity, you are the bearer of a solution, and so I believe that these solutions, to the large extent, including the SAPM and others, can have to be configured by the teams at national level. You know, you just not have to manage the tickets only, but you have to work with the automation, with the treatment of the weapons of analysts there. Well, this is an issue of accompanying teams, you know, it is another paradigm, or tempora or mores, we may say, you know. So, among other things, this is what we wanted to stress. You know, you have to get adapted. You must know how to get adaptation, and you otherwise will be submerged by a flow of information that will be useless. And if you don't have any alert, then you can ask yourself some questions about whether this system is working or not. It is this transition that is important. Platforms change, the way of working change. There are some tools that change. The power is not in a tool, but in the brain that uses the tool. And so that, you know, takes me back to the team. A team, you know, is not just someone that does something out of the blue, but it is someone that knows how these things work, and so they give possibilities for optimization and to make everything more performing. And this is very, very important in terms of security, because we have talked about cloud, but we have also to talk about the evolution of attacks. And in the last years, we have people who have got specialized in the cloud and in the attacks over the cloud, because the complexity of the attack is quite important to take into account, and it's directly connected to the issue we mentioned. I mean, this issue of teams. They have to adapt their tools to the type of problem they have to face. Thank you, Nicola. I am correct to say that we still have 20 minutes ahead? Yes. So if you have questions, you can ask questions. So we will continue, but in 20 minutes we have to conclude. Donc, therefore, raise your hands. I will take your question if you have. Frank.
Pardon, non, je vais le dire en français parce que c'est trop compliqué.
Well, I would like to say it in English. Automation, Frank. Nicola and Fabrice told us that this is something that has to be taken into consideration, because it's going to be the future. Now, to relieve teams and to accompany them instead of replacing it, you know, they use the word auxiliary, such as an assistant. But you, on the need of automation, what do you think? And can you answer whether it is support that is not replacing the human component or not?
So a lot of companies use the cloud for scale, because things scale really well in the cloud. Unfortunately, that goes for your security problems as well. They scale with the scale of the cloud. I think we have to face the facts that the people who understand security and understand cloud security are scarce. That's a situation that's not going to change quickly. So if we want to scale that people, then yes, we have to do that through education. Yes, we have to do that through the schools, but that's the slow route. In the meantime, we have to scale these humans, these brains, by supporting them and taking as much as possible the mundane work, the dull work, the grunt work away from them, and making sure that they really have to come in action when there's a decision to be made, when there's really like a judgment call to be made, and to enable them to have as much information on their fingertips as possible. And the only way to scale that is by automating, by making sure that you have that information, so that with very little security people, you can still have that positive impact and make sure you have enough security people, because the average DevOps team is actually 7 people, 6 dev, 1 ops, and a tenth of a security person every month. That's the reality of things, and it's unbalanced. So we have to put automation in, otherwise we're not going to win this fight.
Mais, du coup, moi, quand je vous entends dire tout ça, on imagine un travail monstrueux justement pour dire qu'il y a finalement besoin de la...
We imagine huge work, so we need is artificial intelligence, but is this something that has to be done by the enterprise itself, or has to be done by other people that have to support the enterprise? Because I know that there are some that do this support, that carry out this support. Well, I think that the people, the partners can ask for that, but it is the company that has to manage its security. So you will not take any confidence in a bank that has security problems. So if you have reliable partners, then it's not a problem. But it is you who have to assure the security of your enterprise. Of course, the enterprises now, they have the questions whether they are secure, they have enough security, and how can they improve that security. This is what the company do every day. I mean, the fact of having a paradigm allows them to be more resilient, because if you have more machines that are attacked by cryptoware, well, this requires to have already thought and anticipated this type of situation. Of course, partners are important. Of course, tools are something of fundamental importance, but the leadership in all that must be taken by the organizations, by the top management of the organization. Managers of these organizations must be aware of these type of things, and they have to have the power to act on that. We have to do that, as the European Union is asking this from us. It's a new regulation that is requesting that. Well, I was focusing on a technical aspect. I mean, the reaction from a technical point of view. Does anyone want to reply to Nicolas?
Yeah, so I fully, I mean, it's a core rule that you can outsource everything except responsibility. So even if you outsource, it stays your responsibility. That goes for whether you outsource to a managed service provider or to a cloud provider. But I think the role of companies like the company I work for, that are managed service providers that help companies with their digital transition, is to also help them with security, because yes, it's your responsibility, but as a company, you can't know everything, especially if you're a small company. And if your core business is making this really smart app that makes people's everyday life better, you're not necessarily have to be a security expert. You can partner with somebody who's an expert on how to do your security and do your cloud and do a safe digital transformation, where you focus on what you're good at. And I think that's where managed service providers and IT partners fit in, or should fit in.
Thank you, Frank. Bon, nous, on a un petit peu fait le tour, je pense, de comment on voulait traiter.
We have done a round table of all the people who are here and wanted to discuss about these issues. I don't know whether you have questions from the room. So if there is anyone who would like to ask something, Nicolas, Fabrice, and one will try to give you an answer if they have the answer. Do you have questions? So you have understood everything. That was extra clear. No, there is a question. We cannot hear that person if you don't give him a mic.
Yeah, I understand.
Si je répète la question, hein, comme vous n'avez pas de micro,
yes, you have to repeat the questions.
L'analyse de risque.
So the risk analysis
En tout cas,
and its transfer on the cloud situation.
I haven't
Frank?
understood the question. There was no mic, so there was no translation.
I can do this. The risk analysis on-prem. So the question is, how about the transposition of this analysis, risk in the cloud? C'est ça, hein? C'est bien transposition du risque dans le cloud. L'analyse de risque.
Je vais commencer et tu peux poursuivre. Alors ça, c'est une question essentielle. Parce que
This is an essential issue, an essential question,
gros point, entre guillemets, de la cybersécurité,
because the cybersecurity
compenser ces risques,
is a risk and has to be compensated. So
solutions possibles, etc. Donc, je vais pas
we have to see how to do that. I don't want to go into the detail of the BioCRM and all the type of risks, but this is a fundamental issue, and it is one of the difficulties. You have said it well. How can we do a risk sensor on a perimeter that changes? I know some organizations that did it in the past, and they renovated every 2 years. And today, they have seen that instead of every 2 years, they have to renovate everything every year, because this is a very important point on several aspects. There is the technical aspect, first of all. I mean, the change of perimeter, of course, from the normal device to the cloud as such, because, there is always a problem of the criticality of the applications that we put in place, but also the aspect of suppliers has to be taken into consideration. I mean, for instance, a supplier such as Microsoft has a very good risk profile, but what is the leverage in case of problem? Do you have a leverage to act against Microsoft in case? This is a huge point. I'm not talking about sovereignty, because when you are in the cloud, you have a whole series of dependencies, and you have to use a specific architecture, and this creates a dependency. But if one day clouds provide double prices, well, you have to pay. And so this is part of the risk analysis. So this issue on risk analysis and the methodologies to implement to make it progress is a very important topic, and it is something that has to be part of the company's strategies.
Yeah, and we're seeing manifestations of that risk as well. I mean, I think everybody who's a Microsoft customer is aware of what they're going to do with their prices very soon, and there's not much you can do about it because it says in the contract they can do it. But the thing with risk assessment is that it's very difficult to do, and as humans, we tend to ignore the risks we take every day that are common to us, and we tend to exaggerate risks that are rare. So people who don't often come in exotic places are worried about being eaten by a tiger when they travel there, but get into their car and drive to work, and that's the most risky thing they're going to do that day. So if you make the risk analysis of a digital transition, make sure to balance it with the risk of keeping things as they are. Because we see that companies need more and more data to actually make a difference. If I'm going to start a taxi company right now, probably my biggest differentiator is not going to be what kind of cars I have or my drivers, but my biggest differentiator is, can I get an app that can make sure that my users can get a taxi earlier and with less friction. So that digital transformation, that need for data, the hunger for data can only be satisfied in a cloud environment most of the time, because none of us have the IT staff that's required to run things like artificial intelligence on premise. It just can't be done. The first artificial intelligence installations were bigger than this room. And today still, if you want to do something like ChatGPT, you need a complete building full of computers. Nobody can do that. But we can run the ChatGPT model in the cloud for a fraction of the cost and the investment we would do. So I think you have to, or if you do the risk analysis, make sure you weigh it up against the risks of staying out of the cloud.
J'espère que ça répond à votre question.
I think this is answering your question. Do you have any other question?
Oui.
Yes, over there. The microphone is getting to you. Don't move. Good morning. Good morning.
Pardon. Dans le fond. Mais il y avait une question dans le fond, hein, j'ai bien vu, hein, d'accord. Donc on
Yes, there is a person at the bottom of the room who would like to ask a question after. Well, in my cybersecurity team, we have a traditional team that deals with the internal server. Another one is a cloud team that for the products that we have available to our clients. How can I harmonize the response to incidents? How can I coordinate all that?
vous êtes à la FIC cyber, hein, c'est ça, hein?
Oui, tout à fait.
Jolie question.
I think it's a nice question, but I cannot answer the question. I cannot answer the question in a complete way. I can just talk about my experience, what I have seen. There is no miracle way, to find a solution. I mean, a harmonization in the team and training of the team is already a nice and good things. And you have to rotate the people on a different team so that everyone has a sharing of knowledge of every sector, and they should know what could happen and where to act. Then you have also to consider automatize the solutions that could be more universal and that could allow to break the problem. If I need the same tool for IC ticketing, well, I can need the main tool, but for the automation is the same. We can find solutions that could correspond to cloud solutions or IT solutions. I take as an example the typical case of an employee that leaves a company, and so you have to take the privilege of his privileges. So you cannot just delegate your security. So if you give a privilege to someone and then someone leaves you, you have to know how to manage, that. Even if when it is heterogeneous, you have the problem of the privileges with a person that has left the company. It could be a privilege on a cloud provider, but also the access to software that is out of the team. So this has to be taken into consideration in the enterprises, because this is a risk, and it is not within the scope of the SOC that is just focused on the management of accidents, etc. But where is the security if the people in the SOC do not understand the profession, the way in which the enterprise works? They will go through something that is creating a problem. So we have to see how to provide organizations the security they look for. Thank you, Fabrice. On this information sharing, the question, Frank, how can we share information for all the teams that manage the cloud and that do not communicate with one another with the cyber cellule? A cell? Can we do that with the cyber cell that tells me what has gone on, and that we are there to get them free from this type of block and assure security to all of them?
Yeah, I will answer shortly because you have another question as well. But I think you have to look at DevOps. One of the reasons for going to DevOps was to take away walls and barriers between teams with a different specialization. If your organization gets attacked, the attacker doesn't care which security team is handling this. So I think the key point is you will have to integrate your teams, because you need one security posture, because an attack can start at one point and then migrate, mitigate, move migrate to another point in your organization. So try to tear down those walls, and beer and wine usually helps.
Thank you. Dernière question, et on va répondre en mode supersonique.
Thank you very much. And a last question. Good morning, and thank you very much for this round table. You know, I would like to ask a question to Stefan. You have mentioned acronyms, etc. So I would like to go on this issue, back on this issue of this growth of solutions in terms of security, but the multiplication that we can have via the automation can help the multiplication of these security systems will have an impact on the automation of the incident response. I try to be fast. Well, tools are one thing, but the real point is strategy. If you start to walk and do and start to master some basic tools, then this is already good. And many of these tools are there. They can be used by anyone. And once more, it is better to go step by step in the progression. You don't have to want to go through fast and everywhere, and then you have to see the strategies of the enterprises and your needs in terms of security, because each one can have a different perspective in terms of security, and so it is important to see where you are going. You know, you have to see if the automation is a cause of multiplication. Well, yes, I think that automation is slowing things down. Well, if you have automation, but automation is not well controlled, this is going to be a problem. And on the contrary, if you reduce everything and you don't have automation, you're not going to obtain much. So automation is a tool. That depends on how you use it. Once more, the added value is the human person behind the tool. I would like to complete this answer. Automation will allow you to get rid of tasks that are repeated over and over. So this is going to help you from that point of view, and will give more time to the teams to focus themselves on what is interesting. So we see automation not in an extreme way on all processes, but only on those processes that will help humans not to repeat the same things over and over again. Yes, thank you, Fabrice. We have to give the floor to Frank. That will be the last one in this conference to take the floor. But the consolidation is to be an answer, Frank, to this.
Well, maybe I misunderstood the gentleman's question a little bit, but I was thinking, like, he was talking about the multiplication, so having lots and lots of automation. And I think that's a good observation. Right now there's a vacuum. These tools are new. We don't know what we need yet, and I think that's the honest answer. I think if there's any vendor here who's trying to tell you that he has a tool that will take away all your security problems, you should walk away from his booth. There is a vacuum right now that's attracting a lot of players and a lot of players in the market, and there's a gazillion people who put everything out there. And I think if you look at the trend, for instance, of CNAPP, cloud native application protection, there you see that security tools get integrated. So I predict that in the coming years there will be a shakedown in the market for security automation, and we will see the good ones survive. And that means that a lot of us will select the wrong tools. Unfortunately, some of us will be lucky and select the right tools, but it will get better.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup à tous les trois. En tout cas, merci à vous de nous avoir suivis. Merci aussi à vous en ligne
Thank you pour nous avoir, for following us. Thank you for bringing some elements of answers to your reflections. Perhaps we have put a point that could help you to go ahead. Well, if you want, you can contact Fabrice and Nicolas very easily. We thank you and we wish you a good end of the day and the weekend. Thank you
Merci.
and goodbye.